Welcome to Just Speak, English podcast. You know, there's this romantic idea about packing your bags and moving to a new country. We see it in movies, the excitement, the adventure, the discovery. But what we don't often talk about is the moment that initial thrill wears off and you're left standing in a supermarket, completely bewildered by a different brand of milk. That, in a nutshell, is the beginning of culture shock.
The supermarket is a classic battleground. I've been there.
And we're so lucky to have someone here today who has been there many, many times. I'm joined by Leo, a travel writer and photographer who has called more countries home than most people have visited. Leo, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Corey. It's a pleasure. And yeah, the supermarket analogy is painfully accurate.
I'm glad it resonates. Today, we're diving deep into that very feeling. What is culture shock, really? And more importantly, how do you handle it without losing your mind? If you enjoyed these kinds of conversations about the real human experiences behind travel and life abroad, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. So, Leo, let's start at the beginning. Take us back to your first real welcome to culture shock moment.
The first one that truly hit me? It has to be my first few weeks in Tokyo.
Tokyo? That's a deep dive for a first experience. What was it that struck you? The language? The crowds?
You'd think so, right? But it wasn't the big, obvious stuff. It was the silence.
The silence? In one of the world's biggest cities?
Exactly. On the subway. You could have a train car packed with hundreds of people, and it would be almost completely quiet. No loud phone conversations, no music bleeding from headphones, just the hum of the train. Back home in the U.S., public transport is, well, it's a symphony of noise.
That's a polite way to put it. So that quiet felt unnatural to you?
It felt alien. At first, it was part of the honeymoon phase. You know that feeling? Everything is new and fascinating. Wow, everyone is so polite and considerate. But after a couple of weeks, that fascination started to curdle into anxiety.
How so?
How so? I became intensely self-conscious. Am I being too loud? Is my backpack taking up too much space? I felt like I was a giant, clumsy bull in a very delicate, quiet china shop. The silence stopped feeling polite and started feeling judgmental.
I can completely understand that. It's like the unspoken rules are the hardest ones to learn because nobody ever tells you what they are.
Precisely. And that's the core of culture shock, I think. It's not about not knowing the language, it's about not knowing the music, the rhythm of social interaction. In Japan, that rhythm is very subtle and harmonious. My American rhythm is more like a drum solo.
A very loud, enthusiastic drum solo.
Exactly. And I felt it everywhere. At the convenience store, the konbini, the clerks have this incredibly intricate dance of service. They greet you, they scan, they ask if you need a bag, if you need your hot and cold items separated, if you need chopsticks, a spoon, a straw.
Wow.
And in the beginning, I was just frozen. I'd just nod and say hi, yes, to everything. I'd walk out with 5 different bags for 3 items and a collection of plastic cutlery I didn't need.
Because it was easier than trying to interrupt the flow.
It was easier than messing up the dance. I felt like I was constantly on stage, forgetting my lines. That initial awe, the honeymoon, it wore off and was replaced by this low-grade, constant exhaustion from just trying to perform basic daily tasks.
That's such a powerful way to describe it. The exhaustion. It's not a physical tiredness, it's a mental and emotional drain.
It's a cognitive load that you're not used to carrying. Every single interaction, from buying coffee to asking for directions, requires active, high-level processing. You can't run on autopilot.
And at home, 90% of our day is on autopilot.
Absolutely. You don't think about how to greet a cashier, you just do it. When you lose that autopilot, you realize how much mental energy it was saving you.
So the honeymoon phase is when the differences are charming, and the shock phase is when those same differences become draining.
That's it. It's the moment you stop feeling like a tourist on an exciting adventure and start feeling like an outsider who just wants to buy milk without having a minor existential crisis.
The quest for milk, a universal struggle. Did you ever just give up on a particular day? Just stay inside because it was too much?
Oh, for sure. There were days I'd just eat the weird snacks I had in my apartment rather than face the konbini dance. It's a classic symptom of the frustration stage. You start to withdraw.
It's interesting because from the outside, people might just see the amazing pictures on Instagram. They don't see the internal struggle.
Right. They see the beautiful temples, not the 2 hours of anxiety it took to figure out the bus route to get there. Culture shock is a deeply personal and often invisible battle.
So let's talk more about that frustration stage. You mentioned withdrawing, but it can get uglier than that, can't it? It's not just sadness or anxiety. Sometimes it's outright anger.
Oh, absolutely. Anger is a huge part of it, and it's usually completely irrational. You find yourself getting furious about things that are, in the grand scheme of things, totally insignificant.
Give me an example. What's the most irrational thing you got angry about?
Okay, this is embarrassing, but in the spirit of honesty, garbage.
Garbage?
In my neighborhood in Japan, you had to separate your trash into about 8 different categories: burnables, non-burnables, plastics, PET bottles, cans, glass, and each one had a specific collection day.
That sounds complicated.
It was a nightmare. I had this color-coded chart on my fridge that I could never quite decipher. I was constantly missing the right day for the right type of trash. So my tiny apartment would just fill up with these meticulously sorted bags of garbage. I remember one morning I ran out to catch the plastics truck and I was a minute too late. I just stood there on the street holding a bag of clean plastic wrappers, and I felt this white-hot rage.
At the garbage truck?
At the garbage truck, at the system, at the whole country. In my head, I was screaming, "It's just trash! Why does it have to be so complicated?" It felt like the country itself was conspiring to make my life difficult.
And that's the key, isn't it? You start to personify the culture. It's not just a different way of doing things. It's they are doing this to me.
Exactly. You start developing this us versus them mentality. You find yourself complaining with other expats. Can you believe they do this? Back home, it's so much easier. It's a bonding mechanism, but it's a toxic one. It deepens the chasm between you and the culture you're in.
It's a trap. It feels good in the moment to have your frustrations validated, but it just reinforces the negativity.
It's a huge trap, and it can lead to some, let's say, unbecoming behaviors. I had a friend in Italy who became what we called a confrontational cuer.
A confrontational cure? What on earth is that?
Well, the concept of a neat, single-file line isn't as, shall we say, sacred in Italy as it is in the UK or the US. It's more of an amorphous blob that shuffles towards the counter.
I've seen those blobs.
And it drove my friend insane. He was a very orderly guy, so he made it his personal mission to enforce proper queuing etiquette. He would literally go up to people and say, "Excuse me, the line starts back there." Or he'd stand with his arms out to create a barrier.
Oh no, how did that go over?
About as well as you'd expect. He just looked like a crazy, angry foreigner. People would either ignore him or get into arguments with him. He was spending all this energy trying to force his cultural norm onto a place where it just didn't apply. He was miserable.
And he probably felt very righteous while doing it.
Completely. He thought he was a crusader for politeness and order. But in reality, he was just a man yelling at a post office blob. It was a coping mechanism, but a terrible one. It was his version of my rage at the garbage truck.
It seems like the frustration stage is about trying to exert control in a situation where you feel you have none.
That's it, perfectly. You can't control the bureaucracy, the language, or the social norms, so you fixate on something small, like the way people line up or sort their trash, and you try to control that. It's a losing battle, every time.
And it isolates you. Instead of trying to understand the local why, you're just screaming about your own how.
Right. You're not building bridges, you're building walls, and you're the only one trapped inside them. The frustration stage is where a lot of people either burn out and go home, or they make a conscious choice to change their perspective.
Okay, so that's the critical juncture. You're standing on the street, furious at a garbage truck, or you're trying to police a line at the post office. You're miserable. How do you pull out of that nosedive? What's the first step towards actual adaptation?
I think the first step is acceptance. You have to accept that you are not in control. And more importantly, you have to accept that the local way of doing things isn't wrong or stupid or designed to annoy you. It's just different. It works for them.
That's a huge mental shift, to go from this is wrong to this is different.
It's everything. For me, the turning point with the garbage in Japan was when I finally asked my neighbor, a lovely older woman, for help. I used my terrible broken Japanese to ask her to explain the chart.
You humbled yourself.
I had to, and she was so kind about it. She came over, she explained the symbols, she told me which days were which, but then she explained the why. She talked about how it reduces landfill, how it's about community responsibility, how it keeps the neighborhood clean. Suddenly, it wasn't a stupid, complicated system. It was a deeply ingrained cultural value of civic duty and respect for the environment.
So understanding the why changed everything.
It diffused the anger completely. It reframed the entire issue. It was no longer a personal inconvenience. It was a communal effort I was part of. My advice to anyone struggling is find a cultural informant.
I love that term, a cultural informant.
Someone local who you can ask the stupid questions. Why do people slurp their noodles? Why does everyone apologize so much? Why is this garbage system so complex? Having someone who can decode the culture for you is invaluable. It turns frustration into fascination again.
That's a great actionable strategy. What else? What about on a more personal, day-to-day level?
Create a sanctuary of familiarity. You can't be on 24/7. Your brain will break. You need to carve out a small part of your day or your home that feels like you. For me, it was my morning coffee routine.
Tell me about that.
No matter where I was in the world, Brazil, Italy, Japan, I had my specific coffee beans that I'd bring from home, my favorite mug, and the same 20-minute ritual of grinding the beans, brewing the coffee, and just sitting with it. In a world of overwhelming newness, that little routine was my anchor. It was predictable and comforting. It was a piece of home I could take anywhere.
It's about creating a small pocket of control in a positive way rather than a negative, confrontational way.
Exactly. You're controlling your own space, your own routine, not trying to control the world outside. Another huge thing is to learn to laugh at yourself. You are going to make a fool of yourself. Constantly.
It's inevitable.
It's guaranteed. I once walked into a formal tatami room in Japan wearing my shoes. The collective silent gasp from everyone in the room, it was mortifying. In the moment, you want the ground to swallow you whole. But later, you have to be able to laugh about it. If you take every mistake as a personal failure, you'll be crushed. If you see them as stories you'll tell later, it becomes a game.
So the strategies are find a decoder, create an anchor, and embrace your inner fool.
That's a pretty good summary. It's about shifting from resistance to curiosity. Instead of saying, I hate that they do this, you start asking, I wonder why they do this. That one-word change from hate to wonder is the key to the whole kingdom.
So let's assume you've done it. You've embraced your inner fool, you've found your cultural informant, you have a beautiful garbage sorting system, you've adapted, you feel at home. The story's over, right?
If only. That's when you get hit by the final boss of culture shock.
Which is?
Reverse culture shock. The shock of going home.
This is the one that people almost never talk about. The assumption is that returning home is easy, it's familiar.
It's anything but easy. In some ways, it's harder than the initial shock of going abroad, because it's so unexpected. You expect to feel disoriented in a foreign country. You don't expect to feel like a stranger in your own hometown.
What was that like for you, coming back to the US after years away?
It was jarring. The first thing that hit me was the noise and the pace. Everything felt so loud. People in stores talking on their phones, the casual way people would interrupt each other. After the quiet order of Japan, it felt aggressive.
It's funny, the very things that probably felt normal before you left now feel alien.
Completely. And the conversations. After living in places with a more collectivist mindset, the individualism in the US felt, well, a little self-absorbed. Everyone was talking about my career, my brand, my journey. I had gotten used to a more we-focused way of thinking.
So you felt a disconnect from the values.
A huge disconnect. But the most surreal experience was in the supermarket. We're back to the supermarket.
It always comes back to the supermarket.
I went to buy cereal, and I stood in the cereal aisle, and there were literally hundreds of options. A wall of colorful boxes screaming at me. I'd just come from a place where you might have 3, maybe 4 choices. And I couldn't choose. I felt this overwhelming sense of anxiety and disgust.
Disgust? That's a strong word.
It felt so wasteful, so excessive. All that sugar, all that packaging, all that marketing energy for breakfast flakes. In that moment, I was looking at my own culture through the eyes of an outsider, and it looked bizarre.
So reverse culture shock is the process of realizing that you are the one who has changed. The place is the same, but you're seeing it with new eyes.
That's it exactly. And it can be very lonely. Your friends and family are happy to have you back, but they can't really understand the person you've become. You try to tell them stories, but there's no shared context. You feel out of sync.
How do you cope with that? The same strategies? Find a home cultural informant?
In a way, yes. You reconnect with other people who have lived abroad. They're the only ones who truly get it. They understand that feeling of having a foot in 2 different worlds and not feeling like you fully belong in either.
So what's the ultimate takeaway from this whole roller coaster? Is it worth it? The shock, the frustration, the reverse shock?
100%. It's one of the most valuable human experiences you can have. It breaks you down for sure, but it rebuilds you into someone more empathetic, more flexible, and more self-aware. It teaches you that your normal is just one of 1,000 different versions of normal. And that's a gift. It's the gift of perspective.
The gift of perspective. I think that's the perfect place to leave it. From the bewilderment of a silent subway car to the rage at a garbage truck, and finally to the surreal anxiety of the cereal aisle back home, it's clear that culture shock is so much more than just a bit of travel stress. It's a profound journey of deconstruction and rebirth.
Well said. A journey every person should take, even if it's just by exploring a different neighborhood in their own city.
That's a wonderful point. It doesn't always require a passport. Leo, I can't thank you enough for sharing your stories and your wisdom with us today. It's been incredibly insightful.
The pleasure was all mine, Corey. Thanks for the great conversation.
To everyone listening, I hope this has given you a new way to think about navigating new environments, whether abroad or at home. The key, as Leo so brilliantly put it, is to shift from resistance to curiosity, to change "I hate this" to "I wonder why." And now we want to hear from you. What's the biggest, smallest, or funniest culture shock you've ever experienced? It could be something from your travels or even just from moving to a new city or starting a new job. Share your story with us in the comment section on our website or on our social media channels. We'd love to read them. Thanks again for tuning in to Just Speak, English podcast. If you found this conversation valuable, please consider sharing it with a friend who might enjoy it too. We'll be back next week with another conversation. Until then, take care.